The CNN studio lights shone bright as Kelly Ripa sat behind her anchor desk, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a sharp navy blazer that screamed authority. It was supposed to be a routine Tuesday night interview on The Source with Kelly Ripa. The 50-year-old host had built her career on tough questions and fearless journalism, rising from daytime television host to primetime news anchor in just a few years. Across from her sat Jonathan Roumie, the 47-year-old American actor, known for his performances in both film and television. Roumie had earned his name through years of hard work in the entertainment industry, delivering unforgettable roles that made him a household name. He wore a black blazer, his natural charismatic charm evident, exuding the confidence of someone who had fought battles in Hollywood, overcoming challenges and breaking through barriers. The topic was supposed to be straightforward, discussing the latest developments in the entertainment industry and Roumie's recent work. But Ripa had other plans. Her research team had dug up what they thought was damaging information about Roumie's qualifications and career, and Ripa was ready to dive in. "Mr. Roumie, I speak the enemy," Ripa began, her voice carrying that familiar edge that had made her famous. "I have to ask you directly about something that's been bothering a lot of people. You've had a relatively short career in Hollywood, and some are questioning whether you have the experience to be making the bold statements you've been making about your craft. Do you think you're really qualified for such a high-profile position?" The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. Ripa had just thrown down a gauntlet that would change everything. Roumie's eyes narrowed slightly, but his composure remained intact. He leaned forward just a fraction, his actor instincts kicking in immediately. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Roumie asked, his voice steady but carrying an undertone that suggested Ripa had just stepped into dangerous territory. Ripa, emboldened by what she perceived as uncertainty, doubled down. "I said, given your relatively short time in Hollywood and your untraditional path, don't you think calling yourself a seasoned actor and influencer is a stretch?" What Ripa didn't know was that she had just challenged someone who had spent years honing his craft, someone who had built a loyal fan base, overcome personal and professional obstacles, and become a leading figure in the industry. Someone who was about to remind America exactly who Jonathan Roumie really was. Behind the scenes, CNN producers were already sensing something different about this interview. The usual dynamic of host controlling guests was shifting in real time. Camera operators noticed Roumie's body language. He wasn't defensive or nervous like many celebrities caught off guard. Instead, he had the calm, calculated demeanor of someone who had faced more intense situations and emerged victorious. Ripa, on the other hand, continued, thinking she had the upper hand. "Mr. Roumie, I'm sorry, but you've only been in Hollywood for a few years. With such a limited amount of experience, do you think you can really call yourself a role model to aspiring actors?" At this point, Ripa's confidence was building, but Roumie was simply processing. His demeanor was calm, and his response would be more than she bargained for. Before becoming an actor, Jonathan Roumie had built a reputation as a fiercely dedicated professional in the entertainment industry. He had spent years honing his craft, starring in various notable roles, and becoming a household name through his exceptional performances. Roumie was known for his sharp instincts and dedication to his art, and he had successfully navigated the trials and pressures of Hollywood with poise. But his real strength came from his background as a performer who constantly pushed the boundaries of his craft. He had spent countless hours preparing for roles, facing rejection, and working tirelessly to perfect his performances. Roumie knew how to think on his feet, how to turn criticism into opportunity, and how to use a critic's overconfidence against them. The stakes of this confrontation went far beyond a simple TV interview. This was about respect, about how many successful actors are often questioned and undermined based on superficial judgment. This was about the difference between genuine journalism and performative moments designed for shock value. And this was about what happens when someone makes the mistake of underestimating Jonathan Roumie. Kelly Ripa sat there thinking she had the upper hand. She had the platform, the primetime audience, and what she believed was information that could shake Roumie's reputation. She thought she was about to score another viral moment that would cement her status as a fearless interviewer. Roumie, meanwhile, recognized exactly what was happening. He had faced this kind of challenge before in auditions, on movie sets, and in his career. He knew he was being set up, but he also knew he had the tools to turn this ambush into Ripa's worst nightmare. The CNN audience was about to witness something extraordinary. They were about to see what happens when preparation meets opportunity, when experience confronts arrogance, And when someone who has spent their career fighting for respect gets attacked on live television. Kelly Ripa had just picked a fight with the wrong person, and America was about to learn exactly who Jonathan Roumie truly was. Ripa leaned back in her chair, a slight smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. She thought she had Roumie right where she wanted him. The CNN host had prepared what she believed were devastating talking points, and she was ready to deploy them one by one. "Let me be more specific," Ripa continued, her voice taking on that familiar tone that had become her signature. Part prosecutor, part celebrity interviewer. "You've been very vocal about your opinions on acting, your career, and your qualifications in this industry, but when I look at your resume, I see someone who only became known relatively recently. Don't you think the audience deserves performers with more substantial experience? You've only starred in a few roles. How do you think that qualifies you to speak about acting so authoritatively?" The studio crew exchanged glances. This was getting uncomfortable even for CNN standards, but Ripa pressed on, emboldened by what she perceived as Roumie's silence. Roumie sat perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap. But those who knew him recognized the signs. His jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly. His eyes had taken on a laser focus, the kind developed after years of perfecting his craft. He was not rattled, he was calculated. "Furthermore," Ripa continued, clearly enjoying what she thought was her moment of triumph, "you've made some pretty bold statements about acting techniques and Hollywood standards. I've spoken to several experts who question whether someone with your background should be speaking so authoritatively about these matters." Ripa paused dramatically, clearly expecting some kind of defensive response. Instead, Roumie simply nodded slowly, as if processing not just the words, but the entire strategy behind them. "Are you finished?" Roumie asked quietly, his voice carrying an ominous calm that anyone who had seen his performances would recognize immediately. Ripa blinked, momentarily thrown off by the question. "I'm sorry, I asked if you were finished with your questions," Roumie repeated, his tone still measured, but with an edge that was becoming more apparent. "Because I want to make sure I address all of your concerns comprehensively." Ripa nodded, sensing that something had shifted, but not quite understanding what. "Yes, I think those are the main points." "Good," Roumie said, and then something shifted in his demeanor entirely. The calm actor was gone, replaced by the professional performer who had spent years mastering his craft and overcoming obstacles. "Miss Ripa, before I respond to your interesting characterization of my qualifications, I want to make sure I understand what we're doing here. You invited me on your show ostensibly to discuss acting, my career, and the art of performance. But instead, you've spent the first several minutes of this interview questioning my qualifications to hold the career I've built. Is that correct?" Ripa shifted uncomfortably. The interview was not going the way she had planned. "Well, I think it's fair to ask about—" "I'm not finished," Roumie interrupted, his voice sharp. "You mentioned that you've spoken to experts who question my background. I'm curious, did you share with these experts that I've been working in Hollywood for over a decade? Did you mention that I've played in both TV and film roles, and that I have a deep understanding of the craft?" Ripa opened her mouth to respond, but Roumie was just getting started. "Did you tell these so-called experts that I've spent countless hours in rehearsal, in front of the camera, in auditions, working tirelessly to perfect every performance? Did you mention that I've performed in some of the most prestigious acting projects, both in film and television?" Ripa tried to jump in. "I think you are mischaracterizing." "No, Miss Ripa," Roumie interjected. "I think you're the one who's been mischaracterizing. Let me ask you something. What's your background in acting? Where did you train? How many performances have you given? How many roles have you embodied?" Before his rise to stardom, Jonathan Roumie had built a reputation as a dedicated and passionate actor. He had spent years perfecting his craft, taking on roles that demanded real commitment, and making a name for himself in Hollywood. Roumie wasn't just another actor. He was a performer who had earned respect through his deep understanding of the art and his dedication to every character he portrayed. He wasn't someone who took shortcuts, and his real strength lay in the hours he spent on set and rehearsing to deliver powerful performances. Jonathan's experience went far beyond just acting. He had faced rejection, challenges, and difficult projects, yet he was always willing to learn and grow from every moment. He was ready for any attack, just as he had been when his performances were criticized in the past. His entire career had prepared him for this very moment. And now, Kelly Ripa's attempt to question his qualifications was about to backfire spectacularly. Ripa leaned forward, thinking she was in control, confident that she had prepared a line of questioning that would expose Roumie as unqualified. She had her questions ready and was sure she could tear him down. "Mr. Roumie," Ripa began, her tone sharp, "you've been very vocal about your acting roles, but given that you've only been in Hollywood for a few years, don't you think you're a bit unqualified to talk about acting techniques with such authority?" The studio fell silent. Ripa had just thrown a punch, thinking it was a clean hit, but Roumie's expression remained calm, unfazed. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Roumie asked, his voice steady, with a hint of calculated precision, as if he was already sizing up the situation. Ripa, sensing a shift but emboldened, repeated her question, doubling down. "I said, given your short time in Hollywood and your lack of real longevity in major roles, don't you think it's audacious to claim that you know the ins and outs of this craft so confidently?" What Ripa didn't realize was that she had just challenged someone who had spent countless hours perfecting his craft, someone who had built his career not on shortcuts, but on a deep understanding of the art. Roumie had learned long ago how to turn an attack into an opportunity. Roumie sat perfectly still, his hands calmly folded in his lap. His eyes, sharp and focused, never left Ripa as he processed her words. "Let me stop you right there," Roumie said, his tone now carrying a quiet authority that Ripa had not anticipated. "Before I respond to your interesting characterization of my qualifications, I want to be clear about something. You invited me on your show ostensibly to talk about acting, my journey in Hollywood, and my views on the industry. Instead, you've spent the first several minutes questioning my qualifications to do what I've already been doing for years." Ripa shifted uncomfortably. She had not expected this kind of response. "But it's fair to question, right?" Ripa tried again, clearly trying to maintain control. "Well, yes, but I think I've already made my point," Roumie interrupted, his voice sharp now. "You mentioned that you've spoken to some experts who question my qualifications. I'm curious, did these experts share with you that I've worked in Hollywood for over a decade? Did they mention that I've played a wide variety of roles in both film and television?" Ripa was visibly uncomfortable now, shifting in her seat as Roumie pressed on, each word taking her deeper into a corner she couldn't escape from. "Did you tell them that I've spent years developing my craft through not just acting, but understanding the nuances of different genres? Did you mention that I've worked alongside some of the most respected names in the industry?" Roumie's voice grew more commanding with each word, and Ripa's confidence began to crumble. "And did you conveniently leave out the fact that I've worked with some of the most challenging directors in Hollywood? Or that I've made a career out of portraying characters with depth and authenticity?" Roumie continued, each sentence landing with the precision of a well-placed punch. Ripa, now rattled, opened her mouth to speak, but the words failed her. "Let me ask you something," Roumie said, leaning forward now, his voice strong and unwavering. "What exactly would qualify someone, in your expert opinion, to be an actor in Hollywood? And more importantly, who appointed you the arbiter of that qualification?" The tension in the studio was palpable. Ripa had no immediate response. She had been caught off guard, her attack neutralized by the very person she had attempted to undermine. "The way you've been questioning my qualifications," Roumie continued, his voice now taking on the finality of a courtroom statement, "is a clear example of how people in my profession are often overlooked. What you've done here is the opposite of what a journalist should do. You've tried to discredit me, but it's actually your credibility that's in question now." Roumie reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. Ripa looked on, unsure of what was coming next. "Since you want to discuss qualifications, let's discuss them properly," Roumie said, opening the folder and laying out documents on the desk. "Let's start with education. I graduated with honors from the prestigious New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. Where did you study journalism, Kelly?" Ripa's face flushed, and she mumbled something about the University of Alabama. But Roumie wasn't done. "Now let's talk experience. After graduating, I worked with some of the most influential directors and actors in the world. I've performed on the biggest stages and in front of millions. I've played roles that demanded real depth, authenticity, and vulnerability." Ripa, now visibly flustered, couldn't find a way to respond. She had set out to diminish Roumie, but now she was the one on the defensive. Roumie continued, "I've built my career not on viral moments or superficial fame, but through hard work and dedication. So let me ask you again, Kelly, what exactly qualifies you to question my qualifications?" The studio was dead silent. The cameras, the crew, Everyone was waiting for Ripa's response, but she had none. "I'll answer for you," Roumie said, standing tall now. "None. Zero. You've never worked a day in Hollywood. You've never stepped into a role. And yet, here you are, questioning someone who's spent their life in this industry." The weight of Roumie's words hit hard, and the studio was still as a grave. Ripa had no comeback. Roumie had not only defended his qualifications, but he had expertly turned the interview into a lesson on the importance of preparation, credibility, and respect. "Miss Ripa, I want to address something else you said. You mentioned speaking to industry experts who questioned my qualifications. I'm curious, can you name these experts? Can you tell us their credentials? Can you share their specific concerns?" Ripa's face began to flush. She stammered slightly, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, I can't reveal my sources." "Of course you can't," Roumie interrupted, his voice dripping with the kind of disdain usually reserved for unreliable witnesses. "Because they don't exist, do they? This wasn't journalism, this was a hit job. You came into this interview with a predetermined narrative, trying to ambush me with questions designed to undermine my career. You didn't come here for a substantive discussion. You came to discredit me." Roumie leaned forward now, his eyes locked on Ripa with laser intensity. "But you made one critical mistake, Miss Ripa. You underestimated me. You looked at me and saw what you wanted to see. An actor with a few years under his belt who you thought would be easy to intimidate. You didn't do your homework. You didn't understand who you were dealing with. And now you're facing the consequences of your own incompetence." The words hit like hammer blows. Ripa's face had gone from flushed to pale, and she was clearly struggling to salvage the situation. "Here's what real qualifications look like," Roumie continued, his voice now carrying the authority of someone delivering a closing argument. 15 years of acting experience, decades of working on stage and on screen, multiple successful roles, and collaborations with the most respected directors in the industry. Roumie paused, letting each credential sink in. "But you know what? The most important qualification is the trust of my audience. The people who have supported me, watched my work, and believed in my abilities. They didn't need your approval, and neither do I." Ripa tried one last desperate gambit. "Jonathan, I think you're being overly defensive." "Defensive?" Roumie's voice rose for the first time, and the power in it was unmistakable. "Miss Ripa, I'm not being defensive. I'm being accurate. There's a difference, though. I understand why you might not recognize it." Roumie stood up, gathering his materials with the deliberate calm of someone who had just delivered a masterful performance. "I came here tonight to discuss the industry, to talk about the important work I'm doing and the craft I dedicate myself to. Instead, you chose to waste everyone's time with a poorly researched attack on my qualifications. You've embarrassed yourself. You've embarrassed your network, and you've demonstrated exactly why so many Americans have lost trust in mainstream media." He turned to the camera, addressing the audience at home. "To the viewers watching tonight, you deserve better. You deserve journalists who do their homework, who ask substantive questions about the craft, and who treat professionals with the respect they deserve. What you witnessed here tonight was the opposite of journalism. It was entertainment masquerading as news, and it's beneath the standards that we should expect from our media." Ripa sat there stunned into silence as Roumie delivered his final blow. "Ripa, next time you want to question someone's qualifications, I suggest you start by examining your own. Good evening." With that, Jonathan Roumie walked off the CNN set, leaving behind a host who had been completely and utterly demolished, and an audience that had just witnessed one of the most devastating takedowns in television history. Within minutes of Roumie walking off the CNN set, social media exploded like a digital atomic bomb. The footage of his systematic dismantling of Kelly Ripa spread across every platform faster than anyone could have imagined. The hashtag #JonathanRoumieDestroysRipa started trending on Twitter within the first hour, accompanied by #ActorUp and #DoneTheWork. The clips were everywhere: TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Each platform amplified the moment in its own way. A prominent actor's manager tweeted, "I've seen Jonathan Roumie in action for years. This is exactly who he is: brilliant, prepared, and unshakable. Ripa picked the wrong fight with the wrong man." The tweet got over 50,000 likes in the first 2 hours. Conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, not typically aligned with Roumie politically, posted, "Politics aside, that was a masterclass in preparation defeating ambush journalism. Ripa got schooled." Even that tweet got thousands of retweets from people across the political spectrum who recognized great debate skills when they saw them. But the real explosion came from everyday viewers who saw something deeply personal in Roumie's response. A viral TikTok video from a young actors group garnered over 2 million views. This is what it looks like when someone tries to underestimate a working actor who's actually done the work. Roumie had become a hero to many who felt that the industry's gatekeepers often underestimated true talent. The response wasn't limited to social media. Cable news networks across the spectrum were forced to cover the story. Even Fox News, typically critical of Hollywood celebrities, found themselves in the unusual position of acknowledging Roumie's performance. Tucker Carlson, in a rare moment of bipartisan recognition, said on his show, "Politics aside, that was a clinic in how to handle an unprepared interviewer." Ripa had walked into a buzzsaw of her own making. Even late-night comedy shows got in on the action. Stephen Colbert dedicated an entire segment to the confrontation, complete with dramatic reenactments. Colbert quipped, "If you're going to come for someone's credentials, maybe check your own first. It's like challenging LeBron James to a game of basketball when you can barely dribble." Saturday Night Live announced they would be featuring the confrontation in their cold open, with cast members already rehearsing their impressions of both Ripa and Roumie. The sketch, when it aired, became one of the most watched SNL segments of the year. International media picked up the story as well. The BBC ran a piece analyzing American celebrity journalism using the Roumie-Ripa confrontation as an example of what they called performance journalism, overtaking substantive reporting. Le Monde in France published an editorial questioning whether American television news had become too focused on creating viral moments and rather than informing the public. The memes came fast and furious. One meme showed Ripa at the beginning of the interview labeled confidence and at the end labeled regret. Another featured Roumie with the caption, "When you come for the king, you better not miss." And Ripa missed by miles. Legal Twitter went absolutely wild. Law professors, practicing attorneys, and legal analysts all weighed in on Roumie's performance. A Harvard law professor tweeted, "Perfect example of why you never challenge someone's credentials without doing your homework first." Roumie's response was textbook advocacy. He controlled the narrative, presented evidence, and delivered a closing argument that was devastating. Meanwhile, CNN was facing a crisis. The network's phones were ringing off the hook with complaints about Ripa's ambush tactic. Media critics who had been watching Ripa rise were suddenly questioning whether her aggressive style had gone too far. A media analysis piece published that night by Columbia Journalism Review was particularly brutal. Ripa's attack on Roumie represented everything wrong with modern television journalism. The pursuit of viral moments over substantive reporting, the privileging of drama over information, and the dangerous assumption that preparation can be replaced by aggression. But Ripa wasn't going down without a fight. Late that night, she posted on social media, "I ask tough questions. That's my job. If actors can't handle scrutiny, maybe they shouldn't be in the industry." The response was immediate and merciless. Thousands of replies pointed out the difference between tough questions and unprepared attacks. One particularly viral response read, "Tough questions require preparation and substance. What you did tonight was lazy journalism disguised as toughness." Jonathan Roumie exposed that. The next morning brought even more fallout. Morning shows across all networks were discussing the confrontation. Good Morning America brought on a panel of journalists to discuss the ethics of Ripa's approach. Morning Joe spent an entire segment analyzing how the interview went wrong, but perhaps the most telling response came from CNN's own legal analyst who appeared on Anderson Cooper's show the following night. "Look, I know Kelly, and she's usually better prepared than this," the analyst said. "But what happened last night was inexcusable. Jonathan Roumie is exceptionally qualified, more qualified than most actors. Frankly, to question his credentials while being so unprepared about his actual background was journalistic malpractice." The political implications were immediate and far-reaching. Democratic leadership rallied around Roumie. Speaker Nancy Pelosi issued a statement. "Jonathan Roumie demonstrated last night why he's such a valuable member of the entertainment industry. His expertise, preparation, and grace under fire are exactly what we need in Hollywood." But the support wasn't limited to Democrats. Several Republican colleagues, while disagreeing with his politics, acknowledged his performance. One GOP congressman told Politico, "I don't agree with Jonathan on much, but damn if he didn't handle that perfectly." Ripa got what she deserved. The legal community's response was overwhelmingly supportive. The National Bar Association issued a statement praising Roumie's dignified and professional response to unprofessional journalism. The American Civil Liberties Union tweeted, "This is what it looks like when experience meets preparation." Roumie showed why credentials matter. Within a week, Roumie had gained over 200,000 new followers across all social media platforms. Speaking requests poured in from universities, legal organizations, and advocacy groups. A book publisher reached out about a potential memoir. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from young actors and film students across the country. A second-year drama student at NYU posted a video that went viral. "Watching Jonathan Roumie last night reminded me why I became an actor. He showed us what it looks like to be prepared, professional, and powerful all at the same time." The incident also sparked broader conversations about media representation and the treatment of men in Hollywood. A think piece in The Atlantic explored how actors are often subjected to different standards and more aggressive questioning than their colleagues in the media. The piece, titled "The Roumie Standard When Qualifications Aren't Enough," detailed how successful actors face constant challenges to their credibility that their counterparts rarely encounter. Angela Davis, a political science professor at Georgetown University, appeared on several news programs to discuss the broader implications. "What we witnessed wasn't just bad journalism," she explained on MSNBC. "It was a perfect example of how Hollywood expertise is consistently questioned and undermined, even when the actor is more qualified than the interviewer." The incident resonated particularly strongly with actors across America who had faced similar challenges in their own careers. A viral Twitter thread from a Hollywood director detailed his own experiences. "I've been questioned about my qualifications more times than I can count, by producers, by colleagues, even by the media. Watching Jonathan Roumie handle that attack with such grace and power was cathartic for every artist who's ever had to prove they belong in the room." Professional organizations began using the Kelly Ripa exchange as a teaching moment. The National Association of Black Journalists issued a statement calling for better preparation and more respectful interview techniques when covering actors. The American Film Institute's Committee on Diversity praised Roumie's response as a masterful demonstration of how expertise and preparation can overcome bias and unprofessionalism. CNN, meanwhile, was dealing with serious internal fallout. Sources within the network told media reporters that there were heated discussions about Ripa's interview style and whether fundamental changes needed to be made to prevent similar embarrassment. Some veteran CNN journalists privately expressed concerns that the network's reputation for serious journalism was being damaged by what they characterized as unprofessional ambush tactics, designed more for viral moments than actual news coverage. Ripa tried to control the damage with a follow-up segment a few days later, but it only made things worse. Her attempt to double down on her questioning came across as defensive and tone-deaf. Social media users quickly dubbed it Ripa's second mistake. Her attempt to double down on her questioning came across as defensive and tone-deaf. Social media users quickly dubbed it Ripa's second mistake. The long-term implications were still unfolding. Weeks later, media critics began using the Ripa-Roumie confrontation as a case study in how not to conduct interviews. Journalism schools started incorporating the incident into their ethics curricula. Columbia Journalism School announced they would be adding a new course called Preparation versus Performance: Ethical Standards in Celebrity Interviews, using the Ripa-Roumie exchange as the central case study. The Poynter Institute, a respected journalism think tank, published a comprehensive analysis titled "When Ambush Journalism Backfires: Lessons from the Ripa-Roumie Interview." The piece became required reading at several major news organizations as they reassessed their interview standards and practices. Young journalists across the country took note. A journalism student at Northwestern University created a YouTube video breaking down what went wrong in Ripa's approach, which garnered over 500,000 views. You research your subject, you prepare substantive questions, and you focus on serving the public interest, not creating viral moments. Professional journalism organizations began hosting panel discussions about the incident. The Society of Professional Journalists organized a virtual symposium titled "Accountability versus Ambush: Finding the Right Balance," featuring prominent journalists, media critics, and political communication experts. For Roumie, the moment had transformed him from a respected but relatively unknown actor into a national figure. His interviews and public appearances began drawing larger audiences. His portrayal of characters became more widely recognized, and his performances started getting even more media coverage. Roumie was invited to appear on major talk shows, not to defend his qualifications, but to discuss the substance of his craft. The transformation was remarkable to witness. Within weeks of the CNN confrontation, Roumie was being discussed as one of the most promising stars of his generation. Political analysts and entertainment experts began speculating about his future. Could he be a leading actor in major Hollywood franchises? Was he positioning himself for more leadership roles in the entertainment industry? The man who had been dismissed by Ripa as unqualified was now being discussed as one of the most promising talents in Hollywood. His speaking fees increased dramatically. Universities that had never heard of him before were offering substantial sums for him to speak at commencement ceremonies and policy forums. A major publisher approached him about writing a book about his experiences in acting and entertainment. Television producers reached out about potential documentary projects, exploring his rise from small productions to national prominence. The irony was perfect. Ripa's attempt to diminish Roumie had instead elevated him to a much larger platform and established him as a formidable voice in American entertainment. But the real lesson of the Ripa-Roumie confrontation went deeper than just one interview gone wrong. It was about preparation versus assumption, substance versus style, and in the dangers of underestimating someone based on superficial impressions. Roumie had spent years building his credentials, honing his skills, and preparing for moments exactly like this one. When Ripa tried to ambush him, he was ready, not just with facts and figures, but with the confidence that comes from knowing you've done the work. Ripa, meanwhile, had relied on assumptions and stereotypes rather than thorough preparation. She had looked at Roumie and seen what she expected to see rather than investigating who he actually was. It was a mistake that cost her credibility and became a cautionary tale for journalists everywhere. The incident also highlighted the importance of authentic expertise in an age of performative journalism. Viewers could see the difference between someone who had actually studied and practiced acting and someone who was asking questions without really understanding the subject matter. Months later, when asked about the confrontation in an interview with Essence magazine, Roumie reflected, "That night wasn't about me versus Kelly Ripa. It was about preparation versus assumption, substance versus performance. I've spent my entire career preparing for moments when someone would try to diminish my qualifications. I wasn't going to let that happen on national television." He continued, "The real lesson is for young people watching, especially young men, especially young actors. Do the work, be prepared, know your craft, and when someone tries to tear you down, you'll have the tools to build yourself up." The Ripa-Roumie confrontation became more than just a viral moment. It became a masterclass in how preparation, expertise, and composure can triumph over aggression and assumption. It reminded America that credentials matter, that experience counts, and that sometimes the person you least expect to be formidable turns out to be the most prepared person in the room. And for everyone watching, it was a reminder that in an age of sound bites and gotcha moments, substance still matters. Real qualifications still count. And sometimes justice comes in the form of a perfectly prepared actor systematically dismantling an unprepared journalist on live television. Thanks for watching this incredible moment unfold. If you enjoyed seeing Jonathan Roumie absolutely demolish Kelly Ripa with facts and preparation, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more explosive entertainment content. We'll keep bringing you the moments that define Hollywood, the confrontations, the victories, and the lessons that shape our industry. Don't miss the next viral moment that everyone will be talking about. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you're first to see the action.